but are not planned for flight? And what, if any, plans does NASA have to fly that hardware to the ISS, free flyers or other microgravity platforms? Is there a lot? And who's participated in those things? Can you elaborate some on that for me?
Yes, in terms of the AMS, right now we don't see a spot in the current shuttle manifest, the remaining 10 flights to fly the AMS, and that's because of the discussion we just had on the criticality of the spares. The problem is if I took those spares off and replaced it with AMS, then I've hurt the basic infrastructure that's needed on board Space Station to support the AMS. So in other words, AMS needs power, it needs data, it needs cooling. If I don't fly the spares that can provide power, data, and cooling and have to take those off for AMS, then AMS is on orbit, but it may not be able to support it by Space Station because the basic infrastructure is there. So I need those flights to fly the spares.
But now those don't include the two contingency flights.
No, those two contingency flights are full of those spares I just described.
They're full. So even beyond the contingencies, we don't have a place for the AMS.
Not in the existing manifest with those two contingency flights. There's not room.
What about the other facilities and experiments and such?
The other facilities, I don't think there's any facility that is actually on the ground ready to be flown. There's ones that have been canceled earlier, like the large centrifuge module that was talked about earlier. That was canceled very early in its development phase, or not very early, but in its development phase, and it's in nowhere ready condition to go fly. We do have many facilities scheduled on the remaining shuttle flights, on the multipurpose logistics flights. There's a combustion rack that's going to go up. There's a window observation facility that will fly. So the basic research racks that were originally designed are still present on the manifest, and they're still there. Our goal has been to outfit Space Station with the best racks we could to provide a wide variety of research capability for Space Station, and that's the goal we're still on, and we still have plans for those equipment. But I'll take it for the record to go investigate a little bit deeper to see if there's anything that's completed that's not getting to fly, but my recollection is there's not.
But is it worth this Congress giving consideration to the additional money necessary to get those things, even if it's just down to the AMS? And I think there are some other things related and otherwise. Is it worth our country to look at the potential investment necessary for the hope of the return that would come from these things?
Again, that's tough for me to pass judgment on. I'm an engineer who builds the basic laboratory. I think it would be better posed to the scientists and the researchers associated with AMS than to myself.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The candor, I appreciate it. I really think that we have set some unfortunate policy along the way, and we've really been short-sighted in a number of things that we have done. Perhaps if we would have finished the crew return vehicle when we did the X-38, if you all remember that we shut down prematurely. We were at the end of its development, and we actually spent more money to shut it down than we would have to fly it. And perhaps that could have been used today to have been the crew exchange vehicle. So I hope that we're getting our ducks lined up properly. I would sure like for us to give consideration as this panel and as a Congress to what we can do to identify other of those pieces of hardware. And I think we also have to consider what we've done as far as relationship is concerned to the nations that spent more than $1 billion just on that one project, for us to renege on our promise to help put it up there to completion. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to editorialize there at the end.
Would the gentleman yield just one moment?
I would indeed.
Part of the problem is the expectations of a lot of universities that have put considerable work and requests in and were promised certain things on certain flights that have not been flown. Where it's important to go with our international allies, it's also important to keep the word with the universities. That's the reason we need these two flights if we can get them. Texas A&M being one in particular that you're very interested in protecting.
Absolutely.
Now yield back my time.
And reclaiming my time, thank you very much. I think it's critically important for our reputation among other nations of the world. If we're going to entice countries to want to work with us on other science-related activities, that if we say we're going to do something, we ought to keep our word. We ought to do it. And I guarantee you that when we make that commitment, the return to us is going to be no different than what it was during the Apollo years. We'll get so much back, more or beyond the investment that we make to make those things happen, that it'll be extremely worth our while. Hope and pray that we don't lose our position to other nations in this space race. I will yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lamps. It's been said you give two Texans a lever, you can move the world. We're going to continue trying to find you all a lever so you can do so.
Hey, we'll use it.
The chair recognizes Congressman Rohrabacher for 5 minutes.
Maybe you could tell us about the willingness now of the Russians to expand their cooperation to meet the challenges that the space station, or excuse me, the retirement of the shuttle are going to present us. Is there a willingness on the part of the Russians, or a lack of willingness on the part of the Russians, to expand our cooperation to make up for that loss?
I think we've really come to work together as an international partnership. When we had the Columbia tragedy and the shuttle was lost and we lost our transportation capability of space station for a temporary period of time, the Russians rose to that challenge and provided us with Soyuz vehicles and Progress vehicles that essentially kept space station viable during that period. So during those 2 years when we were not flying the shuttle, if it were not for the Russians and their support to us, we would not have a space station. As we go to the future, they need our crew on board space station as much as anyone does, because I described, we provide power to their segment. We provide attitude control for the entire space station, which saves them propellant. We have many synergistic and things that we share with them back and forth, so they need our U.S. crew presence there. They recognize they can't maintain the U.S. segment on their own, so they will help us in that venture. But again, they're going to want compensation in terms of a financial contract with us, and we'll work with them to work out the details.
Are they capable of delivering spare parts and the other type of things that are necessary to maintain the station?
They're capable of delivering the spares needed for their segment and to keep it operating. For our segment, we'll use the commercial resupply services to deliver those components to space station for our equipment that needs to be.
If it's we don't have that capability now.
We do not have that capability now. We can also use the automated transfer vehicle that the Europeans are building, and the Japanese are building an HTV.
Which they don't have the capability now. The only people now who've got the capability are the Russians. Is that correct?
No, the ATV recently docked to space station. We brought it up, so we've proven at least one time that that's a good capability. It performed exactly the way it should. We flew it in within 10 meters, backed it back out, flew it back in, successfully docked, and it's viable. The Japanese have a full-up propulsion test article. They're test firing in Japan. Their vehicle's scheduled to fly next year.
But I'm talking about something that's online, not something that we've done once.
The thing that's online is the ATV.
Okay. And so that capability will permit us then, once the shuttle is retired, to deliver these spares that we need.
We're going to need a combination of services when the shuttle is retired. We're going to need the ATV, the HTV, and commercial resupply.
Okay. Let me note that to the degree that we are not, that we've been short-sighted, and I